What happens when an undercover CEO checks into his own luxury hotel and uncovers a shocking truth? Ethan Caldwell thought his business was thriving, until he went undercover at Silver Cascade Hotel and saw the reality his employees faced: overwork, neglect, and outright mistreatment. What he discovered changed everything, forcing him to confront the failures of his own leadership. How does he take action, and can he fix the damage before it's too late? Stay tuned as we dive into this eye-opening story of power, responsibility, and redemption. Ethan Caldwell, the CEO of Regent Haven Hospitality Group, had spent years building his hotel empire into a symbol of luxury and excellence. From private investor meetings to expanding into new markets, his focus had always been on growth and guest satisfaction. But lately, something had been gnawing at him. Complaints from employees about long hours, malfunctioning equipment, and management indifference were becoming harder to ignore. Reports of overworked housekeeping staff, safety concerns, and even mistreatment from supervisors painted a troubling picture, one that Ethan had barely glanced at before signing off. At first, he chalked it up to exaggeration. After all, Regent Haven prided itself on maintaining high industry standards. But the complaints kept coming, and his gut told him there was more to the story. That's when Ethan made a bold decision. He would go undercover as a guest at one of his most prestigious hotels, Silver Cascade Hotel, to experience things firsthand. A week later, Ethan arrived at the resort under the name Daniel Clark, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down, a stark contrast to his usual sharp suits. Without the aura of power surrounding him, no one recognized him as the man behind the company's success. He checked in like any other guest, determined to observe, listen, and uncover the truth about how his employees were really being treated. What he didn't expect, however, was how much this experience would change his entire perspective and force him to confront the reality of his own leadership. As Ethan stepped through the grand entrance of Silver Cascade Hotel, he was immediately greeted by an opulent lobby, gleaming marble floors, towering chandeliers, and a well-dressed concierge assisting affluent guests. On the surface, everything appeared flawless, just as he had envisioned for all his properties. But within minutes, subtle cracks in the hotel's perfect image began to show. The front desk was a scene of quiet chaos. The receptionists, though professional, looked exhausted, their movements rushed as they juggled multiple guests at once. One employee, a young woman named Anna, kept apologizing profusely as she struggled to keep up with the line forming in front of her. Ethan watched as she shot a nervous glance toward a tall man pacing behind the counter, Mark Reynolds, the hotel's operations manager. He wasn't helping, he was merely watching, arms crossed, a disapproving frown on his face. Behind Ethan, a bellhop strained to push a luggage cart with a broken wheel, the heavy suitcases threatening to topple over at any moment. "We've been asking for a replacement for weeks," the young man muttered under his breath, wiping sweat from his forehead. No one from management seemed to notice or care. Ethan's instinct sharpened. He had expected to find some inefficiencies, maybe a minor staff scheduling issue or occasional equipment problems. But this was different. There was a palpable tension in the air, a sense that the employees were operating under constant pressure, afraid to slow down even for a moment. After checking in, Ethan took a slow walk through the hotel corridors, paying close attention to the staff at work. A housekeeping cart sat in the hallway, loaded with supplies, but he noticed something odd. The wheels wobbled unsteadily, just like the bellhop's cart. He turned a corner and overheard a quiet conversation between two housekeepers. "They're making us double up on rooms again," one sighed, adjusting her gloves. "It's impossible to keep up." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had barely been in the hotel for an hour, and already he was seeing disturbing signs of mismanagement. If these were just surface-level problems, what else was happening behind the scenes? Determined, he decided it was time to dig deeper. Ethan decided that the best way to uncover the truth was to get close to the staff, so he spent the next day quietly observing their routines. Early in the morning, as he stepped out of his room, he saw a housekeeper pushing a heavy cart down the hallway, her movements slow and deliberate. The cart wobbled with every step, its broken wheel making it nearly impossible to maneuver. As she stopped to adjust it, Ethan saw the exhaustion on her face, deep lines of fatigue, a forced smile when she noticed him watching. "Good morning," he greeted casually. "Morning, sir," she replied, her voice polite but weary. He struck up a conversation, learning that her name was Sofia Ramirez and that she had been working at Silver Cascade Hotel for 12 years. As they spoke, she admitted that short staffing and faulty equipment had made the job increasingly difficult. "They cut the budget for housekeeping staff last year," she said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "So now we have fewer people covering the same number of rooms, sometimes even more." Ethan listened carefully, feeling a growing sense of unease. If someone like Sophia, a seasoned employee, was struggling, what about newer staff members? Later that day, Ethan met Liam Chen, a young maintenance worker who was fixing a flickering hallway light. He had an easygoing demeanor, but when Ethan asked about the job, his expression darkened. "Honestly," Liam scoffed, "it's a mess. We report broken fixtures, but it takes weeks, sometimes months, for anything to get fixed. I told management about a leaking pipe last month. You think they did anything? Nope, they just told me to patch it up for now." Ethan asked if they had safety measures in place, and Liam gave a bitter laugh. "Who of the guys cut his hand on broken glass cleaning a guest room?" Liam said, shaking his head. "You'd think they'd let him go home, or at least take a break, right? Nope. Slapped a bandage on him and told him to finish his shift." Ethan clenched his jaw, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. He had expected to see minor inefficiencies, but this was neglect, plain and simple. These weren't just unhappy employees. They were overworked, underappreciated, and unheard. And for the first time, Ethan wondered, how had he let this happen under his own leadership? By his third day at Silver Cascade Hotel, Ethan no longer needed to search for problems. They were everywhere. He saw housekeepers skipping lunch to keep up with impossible schedules, maintenance workers MacGyvering broken fixtures with duct tape, and front desk employees enduring verbal abuse from impatient guests with no managerial support. But it wasn't until that evening that he witnessed something that truly pushed him over the edge. Ethan had just returned to his room when he spotted Sophia in the hallway, still working, her steps sluggish. The wobbling cart from earlier was even worse now, making her job near impossible. She had stopped trying to fix it and instead half-dragged it behind her. "That thing still hasn't been replaced?" Ethan asked, unable to hide his frustration. Sophia gave a tired chuckle. "They say it's not in the budget," she muttered, shaking her head, "so I just make it work." Her words stung. Moments later, a voice snapped through the hallway. Mark Reynolds, the operations manager. "Ramirez, move faster! We have VIP guests checking in tomorrow." Sophia flinched, but didn't argue. Ethan, however, was boiling. He followed Mark discreetly and overheard him ranting to another supervisor in the staff lounge. "If they can't handle the workload, they should quit," Mark scoffed, sipping his coffee. "Plenty of people are looking for jobs. No need to coddle them." Ethan's hands curled into fists. He had suspected mismanagement, but this was outright exploitation. Later that night, Ethan ran into Liam, who was still on duty. The young maintenance worker was bandaging his hand with a cheap first aid kit. "What happened?" Ethan asked, his voice tense. Liam shrugged. "Smashed my hand fixing a broken door hinge," he muttered. "I told Mark I needed a break, and guess what he said?" Ethan didn't need to guess. "Get back to work, it's not that bad," Liam mimicked, rolling his eyes. Ethan had seen enough. The complaints, the exhaustion, the injuries, these weren't a few minor issues. This was systemic neglect. And if he didn't take action, nothing would ever change. That night, Ethan made a decision. Tomorrow, he was going to confront Mark Reynolds. And when he did, it wouldn't be as Daniel Clark, the guest. It would be as Ethan Caldwell, the CEO. The next morning, Ethan requested a private meeting with Mark Reynolds, framing it as guest feedback. He sat in the lounge, sipping coffee, waiting as Mark arrived, clipboard in hand, wearing his usual smug expression. "Mr. Clark," Mark greeted, flashing a forced smile as he took a seat across from Ethan. "What can I help you with?" Ethan leaned forward, keeping his voice calm but firm. "I've noticed some issues during my stay. The housekeeping staff seems stretched too thin. Some are skipping breaks, and I saw a cleaner struggling with a broken cart that should have been replaced months ago. What's going on?" Mark's smile faltered for a second, but he quickly recovered, waving a dismissive hand. Housekeeping is a demanding job, no doubt, but our team is used to it. They're professionals." Ethan didn't flinch. "And what about maintenance? I spoke to someone who got injured on the job, but instead of being sent home, he was told to keep working. Is that how you run things?" Mark shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his tie. "I'm not aware of any such incident. If it happened, I'm sure it was handled appropriately." Ethan's jaw tightened. Handled appropriately? A cut hand and no break? Faulty carts that haven't been replaced? That doesn't sound appropriate to me. Mark opened his mouth to respond, but Ethan cut him off. "You don't need to explain anything, Mark." He set his coffee down, locking eyes with him, "because I already know exactly what's happening." Then Ethan leaned forward and dropped the act. "I'm not Daniel Clark. I'm Ethan Caldwell, CEO of Regent Haven Hospitality Group." Silence. Mark's face drained of color, his fingers tightening around his clipboard. I had no idea." "That's the problem," Ethan interrupted, his voice cold and unwavering. "You didn't know, and you didn't care to find out. You dismissed complaints, ignored safety hazards, and ran this hotel like its employees were disposable. That ends today." Mark stammered, but Ethan had already made his decision. "You're fired, effective immediately," Ethan said, standing up. "I'll be handling things personally from here." Mark's clipboard slipped from his hands, his mouth opening in stunned disbelief. Ethan didn't stay to watch his reaction. He had bigger things to fix. Starting with the people, Mark had failed. With Mark Reynolds officially out, Ethan wasted no time in taking control of the situation. He called an emergency staff meeting in the employee break room, where the workers gathered hesitantly, some exchanging nervous glances. For years, meetings like these had only meant more demands, more pressure. But today it was different. Ethan stood before them, no longer an observer in disguise, but their CEO, fully aware of their struggles and determined to fix them. "Thank you all for coming," Ethan began, his voice firm but sincere. "Some of you know me as Daniel Clark, but my real name is Ethan Caldwell, CEO of Regent Haven Hospitality Group. I came here undercover to see for myself what it's like to work at Silver Cascade, and let me tell you, what I saw was unacceptable." A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. Sophia and Liam exchanged stunned looks. "I saw housekeepers like Sophia working through breaks, just to keep up," Ethan continued. "I saw maintenance requests being ignored while employees like Liam had to improvise unsafe fixes. I heard from staff who were injured and dismissed. And I witnessed managers like Mark Reynolds turn a blind eye to it all. That ends today." The room fell silent. No one dared to hope, but the fire in Ethan's tone told them he wasn't making empty promises. "Starting immediately," Ethan said, glancing around the room. "We're making changes. New equipment is on the way. Faulty carts, broken vacuums, and old tools, replaced by the end of the week." A few employees sat up straighter, processing his words. "Next," Ethan continued, "we're hiring more staff. No more doubling workloads or skipping meals just to stay on schedule. Every one of you deserves time to rest, eat, and work in a safe environment." For the first time, Sophia looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. And third, Ethan's voice softened slightly. "I know many of you have gone years without a raise. That's changing now. All housekeeping and maintenance staff will receive an immediate wage increase." A hush fell over the room, then a burst of whispers, gasps, even a few shocked smiles. "But that's not all," Ethan continued. "I'm also implementing an anonymous feedback system. No more being afraid to speak up. If something is broken, if someone is being mistreated, I want to hear about it directly." This time, the silence was different. It was no longer fear or skepticism. It was something new. Hope. Sophia hesitated before speaking up. "You actually listened?" Ethan met her gaze. "I did, and I won't stop." A slow clap started from the back of the room, then another. Within moments, the entire staff was applauding, some with relief, some with tears in their eyes. Ethan had built a luxury brand, but today he realized something more important. His company was only as strong as the people who worked for it. And from now on, they would never be ignored again. 7. A new beginning. Rebuilding trust, 500 words. 1 week later, Ethan Caldwell returned to Silver Cascade Hotel, but this time There was no disguise, no alias, just him as CEO. The air in the hotel felt different. The tense, exhausted expressions on employees' faces had begun to ease, replaced with something unfamiliar. Relief, maybe even optimism. He had made promises, but now it was time to ensure that they were being kept. As he walked through the halls, he saw new cleaning carts rolling smoothly, no more wobbly wheels forcing housekeepers to struggle through their shifts. The maintenance team had proper tools and safety gear, and the repair backlog was finally being addressed. More staff had been hired, meaning no one was rushing from one task to another without a break. Sophia was the first to spot him. For the first time since Ethan met her, she wasn't hunched over in exhaustion. Instead, she stood tall, taking her time with her work. When their eyes met, she offered something he hadn't seen before, a genuine smile. "Didn't think you'd actually come back," she admitted, setting down a neatly folded towel. "Most of the time, people in charge make promises, but nothing changes." Ethan chuckled, nodding. "I wouldn't blame you for thinking that, but I meant every word." Liam appeared from the maintenance corridor, grinning as he adjusted his tool belt. "You weren't kidding about the raises," he said. "Almost cried when I saw my paycheck. Almost." He smirked, but the gratitude in his eyes was real. Ethan patted Liam's shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility settle in a different way this time, not as a burden but as a commitment. "You and everyone here deserve better," he said, "and this is just the beginning." Later that day, Ethan gathered the employees for a final announcement. In the same break room where skepticism once filled the air, there was now a quiet confidence, an unspoken understanding that things were changing. "I want you all to know," Ethan said, meeting their eyes one by one, "this isn't a one-time fix. I'll be checking in regularly, and if something isn't working, I want to hear about it. No more getting ignored. No more feeling like no one cares. Because I do." Sophia wiped at the corner of her eye, and a few others nodded, still processing the fact that they finally had a voice. As Ethan left Silver Cascade that evening, he realized something profound. For years, he had measured success by profits, expansion, and guest satisfaction. But true success wasn't just about the luxury experience. It was about the people who made it possible. And from this moment on, he vowed never to forget that again. The story of Ethan Caldwell's undercover experience at Silver Cascade Hotel teaches a powerful lesson about true leadership and corporate responsibility. For years, Ethan had measured success through profits, guest satisfaction, and brand expansion. But he failed to recognize the backbone of his company, the employees who made everything possible. By stepping into their world, he saw firsthand the exhaustion, neglect, and mistreatment they endured. He realized that a company's success isn't just about luxury or reputation. It's about the people behind the scenes who work tirelessly to uphold those standards. Ignoring their struggles had led to a toxic work culture, one that, if left unaddressed, could have collapsed the very foundation of his business. The lesson is clear: leaders must be present, engaged, and willing to listen. True leadership isn't about sitting in boardrooms making financial decisions. It's about understanding, valuing, and supporting the employees who make success possible. When companies prioritize their workers' well-being, morale improves, efficiency increases, and long-term success follows. Ethan's transformation underscores the importance of compassionate leadership, proving that when employees thrive, the company thrives. And that's the real key to sustainable success.